Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and today we're going to have a really good go at building in the MasterBox Lite 3.1 from Cooler Master. Stick around to see how it goes. Okay, so here we go again, another Cooler Master build, and this time we're going to be using the Cooler Master MasterBox 3.1. MasterBox Lite 3.1, one of those. Anyway, it's the 3.1 version of the Cooler Master Lite. So in this build, let's go through quickly what we're going to be putting inside of this thing. So it's going to be a Ryzen based build. So we're going with the Ryzen 3 2200G with built-in Radeon Vega graphics. To keep that thing cool, we're going to be using the Cooler Master 212 LED in red. Now you'll notice there is actually a red theme to this build, so it's going to be black and red, so hopefully most of the parts are going to have elements of red in them, and black. Moving on, so brand wise, well actually motherboard wise, we're going with the MSI B350m PRO VDH, and if you want to see the unboxing and review of this board, you can click on the links up here, and that'll take you to the video I did on that. Now this is the board here, and in the RAM slots, we've got some Qumox 8GB DDR, which is 2400. So we're basically keeping this on a budget. This is a really budget build. The case itself is about £35 UK. The CPU is about £80, thereabouts. The cooler is probably the more kind of expensive part of this build, retailing at the moment around about £20. Motherboard in the region of about 60, and the RAM again around about £60. So all in all, it's quite a budget build, but when it's all done, it should look very nice, and it look a lot nicer than actually the price would suggest. And when we're building a system, you don't want to put all your new shiny parts into a tatty old case. So for the sake of £35, I thought I'd give this one a go. Now, if you've watched any of my previous videos on the Cooler Master cases, I did the Cooler Master MasterBox 5 Lite, which was essentially the same as this, but the ATX version of it, with a few other slight refined details to it. But it had the same problem with the front. So the front panel, being a solid piece of perspex, doesn't allow for a great deal of airflow. Now there is ventilation on the top, which I'll just peel that off so you can see. So on the top, let's just show it to the other camera. So you've got a tiny little vent which lets air in at the top, and at the bottom you've got this tiny little grill mesh. So that is basically all the airflow you get out of this chassis. So because of the heating issues I had with the previous case, which I actually did have to return, I thought with this one, because it's only £35, I'll go ahead and modify it slightly. Now, if you follow the channel, you'll see that I'm going to keep on modifying this until I get it to how I want it, rather than how Cooler Master want it. Because after all, on the box it says make it yours, so I'm going to. So basically what I've done is I've got a drill and quite crudely cut out some holes all along that bottom vent. So you can see your hand? So you've got the original channel, which is there, and I've kind of almost doubled it by drilling straight holes through there. So you can get a nice view of that. So I've tried to keep the aesthetics in place, so I've not taken any holes in the side or the front. I've tried to keep that as standard as possible, but by cutting out channels into this bottom section, hopefully it should alleviate some of the airflow problems we had previously. So carrying on with the airflow theme, now this case comes as standard with a Cooler Master, I think it's a Silencio fan, which is rated from 1000 to 2000 RPM. You only get one of those in the case, but we're going to take that out and we're going to replace the rear fan, and we're going to put two fans in the front, and we're going to be using these AsiaHorse Eclipse fans. They're very cheap and cheerful. You're looking at about £10 for a pair, £12 for a pair. They basically are clear fans, but they've got a red illumination around the outside. Again, going back to our red and black themed build. So two fans on the front, pulling air in. It's going to be slightly restricted because of the airflow of the case. So having one on the rear to exhaust should be a pretty fine balancing act between that. There is also a filter on the bottom for the power supply, and a kind of 120mm area there, but that is basically just for the power supply, so I'm not going to put that into the equation. That is essentially going to be a sealed off part. There is actually ventilation on the back of the case where you've got the PCI expansion brackets. And there's ventilation available there. Depending on how the airflow is in the case, I may actually put some black PVC tape over those little holes just to try and make the air go from the front to the back rather than pulling it up straight from the back and straight out again, because that defeats the purpose of cooling. But anyway, that is essentially all the bits that are going to go into here. The power supply, if you're wondering, is the Be Quiet 400 watt, which I've reviewed also. You can click on the link up here to see that. So that's pretty much all the parts introduced. So let's get building. Okay, so we're back into the building process. So what I've done first of all is removed all the acrylic side panels, the front see-through panel and the rear panel, just to give us access to all the bits and pieces inside. I've also removed the rear Cooler Master Silencio fan, and I've left that out at the moment, so we've got a little bit of room to work with when we put the motherboard in, etc. I've already put the I/O shield in, that's in place, because you don't want to be forgetting to do that. I've installed the power supply and started routing some of the cables, which I'll spin the case around in a minute so you can see exactly what I've done with that. And in the front, I've installed the two AsiaHorse Eclipse fans in red, and also a fan splitter header, so I can put both fans into one header on the motherboard. So I'll spin it around so you can see what I've done. Oh, that cable there is one of the SATA cables for the hard drive, so I've routed that towards the front because the SATA drive is going to end up there, so that's one cable taken care of. This one at the bottom is the PCI Express graphics card cables. There's two 8-pin or two 6-pin cables there. We're not going to be using a graphics card at the moment, so I've just bunched that up there temporarily to keep it out of the way and so we can concentrate on the wires we do actually need. So spinning round to the back. So what have we got? So we've got the front I/O, which is the USB 3, USB 2, audio, power button, etc. So we don't need that at the moment, so we'll leave that to one side. So that's the fan header splitter for the two fans on the front, which will plug into the header. The header on this board, unfortunately, is quite far over this way, so the extra length there hopefully will be useful. So, but we'll come back to that. So at the back here, we've got, this is the secondary peripheral connectors, the SATA connectors, etc., which I've just bunched up and temporarily put there. That's probably where it will end up, to be honest. Probably try and neaten it up a little bit. There's some tie down points here, so the cables can be tied down quite nicely. I've just at the moment put a twist clip or twist, whatever. What are these things called? Twist ties? I'll put a twist tie on it. So that's just bunched that up to keep it in place, and hopefully when we're done be able to put that in there quite nicely. So moving around here, this is the motherboard's EPS power, which is the two blocks of 4 that go together to make it 8. Now there isn't, like I said, there isn't a cutout above there, so we're going to have to try and tuck that around the motherboard. But I've routed it around again. I've used the twist sticks on the motherboard mounting points. I haven't twisted them right up, I've just done a couple of twists just in case I change my mind. But at the moment that routes up there quite nicely and hopefully should fit into the top of the motherboard with very few difficulties. SATA cable is this one going around to the front, which is for the hard drives, as we said, and this is the main motherboard power going straight up the 24-pin connector, which routes through to the inside. So at the moment, cable routing wise, it's not looking too bad. I think it's going well. So the next thing I'm going to do is put the motherboard in and start connecting up some of these power connectors and see how we go with this EPS. See you in a minute. Okay, so we're back again. Now we've had a little bit of a rejig with some of the cables, as was probably expected, to be honest. Mostly down to the size of this motherboard. Now the motherboard, it's a 9-pin mounting rather than your usual 6 or 8 or however many it is. But there's an extra wide board, so because the width of the board, I've had to move some of the things over slightly and some of the routing's been a little bit different. The EPS power cable went in pretty much without a hitch. The one thing I did notice is you can't actually tuck it underneath this seam at the end, because the back panel, when you put the back panel back on, the lip fits in there. So you can have it near it, but you can't have it sort of tucked underneath to keep it completely clean. So that's a little bit of a shame, but it's not a massive problem. I still may take a Dremel or a hacksaw or some power tool or another to this area just to make a better job of it. Now, I think because of how I can see the panel is formed inside, I pretty much know why they haven't included it. It's because it's not a very easy thing to do. So that may well stay like that. It may have to be one of those things that you just live with. But so moving on, we've rerouted now all the I/O panel. Now this does stick out a little bit still, but hopefully shouldn't be too much of a problem. We've bunched it all up together here, so it's left this area quite clear. The fan cables we'll address later. That'll probably be one of the last things we do. And the SATA cable, obviously when we put the SATA drive in a minute, that'll take care of that, and then we can finalise where that's going to end up. But at the moment on the back there, it's looking pretty good. Now we've got the motherboard in and installed, and that went pretty well. You can see there, that's the back plate for the AM4, so if you wanted to put a non-stock cooler in there, one of the ones with the big back plate, you've got plenty of room to work with there. So again, that's actually a really good thing. I quite like that. So let's move round to the back. So power supply's in as it was before. I actually had to take it back out. There's some tiny little rubber feet on the bottom. One of them wasn't quite centered in its mounting, so the power supply wouldn't fit in properly. So I had to take it apart and redo that. So that's something to make you aware of. There's 4 little mounting feet for the power supply to sit on to stop vibrations, so just make sure that they're in the right place before you put it in. If you move the power supply around a little bit or unscrew it and move it slightly, they have a tendency to pop out because they kind of stick to the metal and pop themselves out. So just make sure they're in properly. I've had to redo that. The rear fan is now in, so that's another one of the AsiaHorse Eclipse fans in red. So that's all good. That was a bit of a pain to get in because it's a tight fit between the Cooler Master cooler and the back of the board, but that's just because I've got sausage fingers, so that's not their fault as mine. Well, or God, or Allah, or whoever. Moving around to the inside. Now the EPS power, I'm not sure if you can pick it up, is installed in there. It was a little bit fiddly to get to because there's not a room up top, but still it did go in and wasn't a massive pain in the ass. So Cooler Master Hyper 212 LED. Now this, I believe, is the same height as all of the other 212 range, and this just about fits in. There's a tiny sort of 2mm gap between this and the acrylic glass when I've put it on the front of it, so you can get away with this cooler and its derivatives, but obviously if you're going for a cooler which is slightly bigger, do be careful. There is a very, very small amount of room left when you're done. Cable routing wise, so we've routed the power cable in now. That looks quite clean. We've also got the front I/O connected up, which, because of the positioning of the board, again, not a problem with the case, it's more of a problem with the board because of the extra width. That would have been a bit nicer to kind of cable manage had it been a bit smaller, but it is what it is. One thing I will kind of notice about this, or will say, is this bottom corner where your HD audio is, and in my case the fan header, is actually a really horrible part of the basement to work with. Because of the way the power supply fits quite flush with the metal back panel, there's no way of actually tucking those cables out of the way, and depending on your configuration, obviously, the extra headers there for things like the RGB header, and I think it's a COM port and LPT port, those are all in that same area, so there's no way of really hiding those particularly well. There isn't a way of addressing that because that is a structural part of the case back there, so you can't tuck them in. I have tried to take the power supply out to see if I can make an easier job of it, but it just won't go. It is a solid area back there. But other than that minor niggle, it's all been pretty good, so quite happy with that so far. So the next thing to do now is to put in the SSD. So go ahead now and put that in. That's a pretty simple, straightforward thing to do. So all we need to do is to get the drive. Now on the back of the hard drive mounting caddy, there's 2 little lugs, and they match up with the holes in the drive. And then there's 2 lugs sticking out there with screw holes in, so you just pop your screws in. So let's get that connected up next. I wasn't sure about this mounting when I first saw it. I thought it looked a little bit weird. But actually it does make the most of the space which is available, because you can put your SSD on this top shelf, so people can obviously see it through the plexiglass, which is quite nice. Again, why I went for a Kingston, because of the red and black, to tie in with the red and black theme that we've got going on. The only thing I haven't got red on here is the Be Quiet, because the Quiet is in orange. But other than that, it's close enough. Orange is almost red. Anyway, I digress. So you've got your SSD on the top, your boot drive. So you've still got slots underneath there for 2 more 3.5-inch drives. I'm not going to put one in at the moment, because I'm going to put my Steam library on an external drive just to make things simpler and hopefully reduce some heat as well, because obviously mechanical drives do generate heat. So the less heat we can generate in the system, the better. So that's the drive in. Let's now go around and put some more cables in, put the SATA cable in, which is going to be quite easy to do. That just plugs in on the side, so a right angled cable is going to be perfect on there to hide the wire in. So I'm going to go on and do that, and we'll be back in a minute. Okay, so we're back. We've put the drive in. So this is the rear view now. So you can just about make out there. I've bunched the wires up a little bit crudely there, but that shouldn't really affect the aesthetics from the other side, so that's all good. So we've got all the drives connected. Everything now is connected. We might play around with this wiring a little bit later, but at the moment I think that looks relatively neat. I'm not 100%. It's not great, but it's tidy and it's managed. So when the back panel's on, you're never going to see it anyway. So it is what it is. But there, it's not a bad little chassis to work with. And in fact, actually, I quite enjoyed it. It seemed a little bit easier than the Cooler Master Q300L, which I've done recently, which you can see in the description there. That one was a pain. Mostly my fault, but a pain. But anyway, so let's have a look around the other side and see what else we've done. I actually quite like this chassis. So from the front again, you can see the fans are in place as they were, no changes there. But inside now, so we've got our Kingston SSD in there, which is up and ready to go, all connected up. Again, not the most tidy area down there in this basement. It might be an idea at some point to maybe fabricate a piece of acrylic to go around here, or maybe something, or hopefully it won't be too bad. The most sort of prominent thing of this case is the side window and the front LEDs. So I think once people kind of look at that and see what's going on there, the darker bits down here aren't going to come into it too much. So as a kind of quick walk by, people will think, yeah, that's really impressive. On closer inspection, maybe not so much, but from a distance it's going to look great. So the only thing left to do now is to put the panels back on, peel off all the plastic, get a monitor, a keyboard and mouse, and fire up and see what it's like. So we'll be right back. Okay, so you've seen some shots of the PC and how we built it, so all that's left for us to do now is to turn it on and see what it actually looks like. Hey, pretty nice. Well, this has been a pretty fun build, and I think it's turned out looking quite nice in the end. I'll leave you with some close-up shots of the various bits and pieces inside, and hopefully if you decide to build one of these yourself, then it turns out as well as mine did. I think it looks pretty good, and if you want any advice or if you've got any comments, please leave them in the comments section below. But in the meantime, this has been the Cooler MasterBox Lite 3.1 build. I've been Mike, this is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and we'll catch you again in the next video. Thanks for watching.